When it's someone like me who has a large following, not the biggest, but large, champion driver, also what probably one of maybe 5 people in the world that know how to set up a drift car and relate it to exactly what's happening. Like all of that, but like, and I'm not gonna play the pity party, but like what I make is that's just like what a normal person makes, like that went to school for 4 years, you know, and I work every day and bust my ass and live it. And I'm an icon for our sport, and I'm making the same as someone with a 4-year degree that just got out of college, probably.
Yo, as we get started for this video, I want to remind everyone that Drift Week 9 is coming up in December. We're going to have tons of amazing drivers such as Chelsea Denofa, Night Ride out of Europe, Taylor Ray, and tons of others that are going to drive with us. So if you want to join us, hit me up. I have exactly 4 driver spots left I was holding, and now it's time to sell them. Let's get started.
All right, here is my clickbait topic for Chelsea.
Oh, no.
Let me read it. What is wrong with pro drifting and how would you fix it? And not only that, here, I don't think the audience can really see it. Okay, they don't really need to see it. But I have this broken down. So what is wrong with pro drifting and how would you fix it? Chelsea's a pro driver and all that stuff. We already know all that. I broke it down by tracks, cars, tires, economics, drivers, media, rules, and regions of the world. You can attack any of those subjects. You don't have to do all of them, anything else. You don't have to attack a particular series, but you are a driver in the series that has given up your entire life up until this year, I guess. To like, we used to say you could have been a doctor, you could have been anything, but you chose to be a professional driver. So you can bitch about what's wrong with professional drifting and what you would fix, because there's almost nobody else that's gone through all the, and like you guys run $1 million race team. You guys deal with the media part. You deal with how the organizers promote you. You deal with the types of tracks. They're too slow, too fast. Spectators can't see. You deal with the cars. You have to build cars to rule books. The types of drivers that come out, a bunch of alpha male wannabe guys that all want to, be egotistical and on top of their game and stuff. The rules, such as the tire rules, they could make tires last 8 laps or 10 laps if they wanted to. They could do there's so many different things you could do. And then obviously the region of the world, each have their own thing that dictate. Like Drift Masters has really good media right now, tiny tracks. Formula D has been around for a long time and done, all the Formula D things. Japan kind of started it, and D1 had the amazing option videos, which was the chokehold of how drifting got to everybody on those VHS and DVD tapes forever. And then once the YouTube and internet opened up, those became irrelevant, and drifting, like Japanese drifting, stopped being as relevant, if that makes sense, to us and the rest of the world. Now it's all YouTube. Okay, take it away. So many things to think about.
I mean, this was part of the reason why I stopped driving FD.
Because of questions like this?
Because I ask myself these questions, right? Because I think I have learned over the years that people do not think about drifting the way you and I do. Like, the conversations you and I have would aggravate a lot of thinkers. No, for real. They would be like, and get like pissed off about it and like start arguing back, and like, because I have learned that people don't really think into the sustainability of drifting, the future of drifting, how we continue to grow this, how we keep it steered in a direction that like allows people to be involved at a low level that are also respected, how it appears to the general public, which is 95% of the people that are not watching this right now, and what it looks like to them, and how we keep people educated that are part of the 5%, which is all of you guys watching now. I just don't think people think about it. They're so busy, and I can relate because I ran my own program and dived into it. It was so busy that, like, in a non-selfish way, you're worried about yourself more than what you're a part of. Does that make sense?
Absolutely, yeah.
because, and it is selfish, actually. I just mean, like, no one's being selfish on purpose, obviously. And joining RTR and not running my own program freed up enough time for me to question a lot of these things, like more than when I'm in the truck driving to an event or whatever, and I'm thinking about drifting and what I'm going to do next and what I'm going to do, what my plans are. Oh, it'd be cool to do this, all that. I was able to be like, I have those thoughts, but when I'm driving in a truck, I'm thinking about, like, how do we move this forward? How do we get enough funding where most of the people that want to chase this as a career, as a dream, as a thing, can have enough financial support to live a simple life, outside of drifting, because that's not simple. That's complicating the hell out of your life. And, like, what drifting is viewed, like I've said, to the 95% of the other people, like, what's the first thing that comes to their mind? Do they enjoy it? Is it an experience that when they go to the track and see it, they're hooked? Why are they hooked? How do we understand that and get more people involved? Also, like, how do we grow this and not have it be ruined when it grows? Like, how do we make this so that the paddock doesn't just turn into rich dudes that have lots of money that want to be famous and see that drifting can do that? That's, like, the worst thing in my eyes that can happen. Like, you're going to get me emotional now. But anyways, like,
you want to call anybody out for that?
No. I'm just saying, we don't need, like, we need those people. Like, I get it. I understand that. But how do we make it so that drifters are still drifters? I look at, like, skateboarding and BMX and all this stuff. And like, a good example of that is, like, all the dudes that rode BMX when, like, we were the kids, like, in the 90s and early 2000s. And then, like, when it became really popular and really big, there were kids that were like, I am going to be an Olympic BMXer or whatever the case is. And, like, they weren't even really into it before then. They were just like, I can ride a bike. I can do this. I'm going to start training every day of my life to achieve this. And, like, they get what they want and they roll out, and that's it, and, like, there's lots of that. Skateboarding, same thing. Like, when skateboarding started getting really, really big the third time around in, like, the late 90s and, like, growing, you had people that just were like, rather than focus on being really good at skateboarding, how can I get all the sponsors and take all the money? Like, how do we make that not happen with everyone and have it turn into that? It's hard, especially in a sport that's so fancy and eye candy that we're involved in. Sorry.
My 2-second response to what you're going to say to that, because I always butt in on everybody, is BMX and skateboarding are amazing sports because any kid can get a BMX or a skateboard for their birthday or Christmas or whatever. They don't have to earn it. You're like, you could get a $10 one and they can go out and they can spend all day long doing it, getting good at it, enjoying it. They don't even have to get good. They just have to enjoy it.
Yep.
Race cars, you cannot do that. If you're 12 years old, you have to have a rich family that can afford it and a dad that'll take you to the track and all these different things. It's like horses. A horse girl does not just like, it's different because a horse can just eat grass and run around. But, like, a race car is incredibly expensive. So you're only going to get people of certain ages that can do things.
Sort of.
Yeah. But I was going to say, once the kids get to 18 to 20, they can start to kind of have an O'Reilly's job and drift a little bit. But, like, maybe they have a girlfriend or get a, baby, then they're kind of done. It's just different. But also, you don't have 35-year-old dudes riding BMX bikes anymore because their joints don't take it. So,
right. So there's two parts of that. One, you just mentioned that anybody can get into drifting, really, from 18 to 75, 80, whatever. It doesn't matter. The other part of that is for a normal, like, lower middle class, whatever, you have to have a car no matter what. A car is actually part of life in some way, shape, or form. And, like, even people that don't make a lot of money or aren't as fortunate as others all can, like, have a car and modify it in one way, shape, or form if they're smart enough to, like, financially support it. And and a car is a part of, like, the American culture, like, to the T. So, like, while I understand what you mean with the BMX thing and all that, like when you do become the age of 16, 18, 20 years old, you have a car, you can make decisions that allow you to go drift for fun. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And the consumables in drifting are like, and the cost of drifting is less than most other motorsports, except like maybe fun bracket drag racing, you know, or whatever the case is. So I think our market is a little bit different, and like being able to do it is not that much. It's really in a whole not that much different than, let's say, skateboarding, BMX, or like what I like to use, like motocross. I think motocross and drifting have like similar mentalities and maintenance that's needed, and risk of yourself, you know, versus risk of the car, and costs in that analysis. And like when you are 8 years old, you can go get a dirt bike, or 5 years old, and your parents can buy you a dirt bike or whatever. But they're also, when they buy you a dirt bike, they could be getting into a very heavy investment as well. Things of that nature. But what I was saying is kind of two different parts of that, right? Like you have the people that are kind of like the workforce of drifting, which is like the people that are competing and are building cars and doing pro-am, and then you have the professional side of it that's like all VFD drivers or drift masters or people that are doing even YouTube content that is very, very drift oriented. And then you have the people that are just enjoying it, like in a hobby standpoint, which like is a very easy way to like have a hobby. You could have a drift car, or as a 25, 30, 40, whatever year old, you could have a drift car, or you could have a boat, or you could have a jet ski, or you could have a street bike or a dirt bike or whatever, and it's all relevant in the hobby space. You know, $5,000 gets you a shitty drift car, gets you a decent jet ski, piece of shit boat. Like the financial support of a hobby as like an adult, drifting falls right into the low level aspect of that, for at least how I think.
Okay.
But yeah, back to what you were kind of asking.
Yeah,
like what I was
fixing pro drifting. You're giving as long, in-depth responses to my clickbaity title.
Well, you started going on all these things, hundreds of
No, it's joking. That's what we did. Keep going.
I hit about 3 of your questions already in your
keep
little
going.
thing. Yes, so professional drifting. I don't know that I have the answer to any of this, because I feel like one person's answer is selfish. I do believe that I have a really good outlook on it without like being selfish, because I kind of try to see it from everybody's point of view and perspective. I think one of the biggest things with drifting, and it will always be the biggest thing no matter what, and it needs way more watering and like building, is the judging of professional drifting. I'm not saying that's the problem with drifting, but it is and always will be a problem to viewership. And I think that's also a great thing, because you get rivalries and you get talking and misunderstanding, and then you get everybody's point of views explaining why this person won or that person won, or did you see this, did you see that, and it like gets a lot of people involved in it. But I think it needs like more education in judging and then relaying that to fans. And the biggest thing I am stuck on right now is the accountability aspect of it. I think there's no real accountability for the judges, and they're doing that to themselves. And then what happens is it trickles down to the drivers not understanding why they won or why they lost. And what I mean by accountability, to simplify that in the thought process, is like, judging is so simple. They have a list of like 8 things that give you a 0. But then after getting a 0, the rest of it is so subjective and so like doesn't allow the chase driver to risk moves in the chase. It doesn't allow the lead car driver to really like wow the judges, you know, like when you're in a decel zone and the car's wobbling and you're in the decel zone and the chase car driver gets up and taps them or does something, it's like, oh, who's at fault? You're like, well, if we had some accountability, we would say, hey, in the decel zone, if you wobble at all and the guy we're heavily going to put that on you unless the guy just blasts you, you know?
Mm-hmm.
But there isn't that. Every single time something happens, it's like, oh my God, it's the first time it's happened. But you're like, it's happened 20 times. And I think accountability from the judges would relay to accountability to the drivers, which would relay information to the fans to have a better understanding of what's going on.
Okay.
Judging is the number one problem, and it will always be something, like I said, that's positive, because people will be not understand why, or they'll have a favorite driver and complain about why he lost or whatever. But once there's more definitive judging, I think the sport
is that a dig at a specific series? Does any series get that better than any other?
No, they all have different things. You know, they all have this thing where there's not a lot of accountability. I've seen very recently some theories, some smaller events start to pick up on this theory and more explanation and more kind of a thing for the fans. But yeah, I wouldn't say anybody in particular does it better or worse.
Okay. I think as someone that hosts drift events and stuff, judging for myself and hosting comps has always been the least fun part of the event with the most drama, and we just put up with it because we've never found a better way to do competitive drifting. And that I just deleted qualifying, or like I would do specific things to get rid of as much as it as I could. I think the real answer is to not need competitive drifting or something like that, but that's not a thing until someone makes a Nitro Circus event that can hold tons of spectators. Like for instance, the LZ tour. They take what is essentially just a promotion of YouTubers. Oh man, I'm answering your question. I shouldn't be doing that. But I was going to say, and they get rid of the need for a comp, but then they go, because, they get all the spectators there without the comp. They're just there to see all their favorite YouTubers and everything else. But then the organizers don't think out of the box well enough to not need the competition, because the competition is just what everybody goes back to because they need to be able to entertain the the crowd. So then you end up having a competition when you don't even need it because everybody's just there to see their favorite driver. That makes sense?
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I agree.
That was a very convoluted answer.
No.
So my point was we just keep going back to the same damn thing when we don't even need to necessarily.
I think that there is a need to have competitive drifting, though. I think instead of taking it as competitive drifting is drifting, it's just a part of drifting. It's not. It's not anything past that. You can't have the best drivers in the world, and you can't find funding, and you can't do all this stuff without some sort of platform that allows people to prove themselves, right?
Yeah.
I've done this in the past. I've had some events where I do jam sessions and just pick the best drivers based on the whole 2 hours, and it's a ranking order where I just keep kind of moving everybody around and find the winners. And I think that could be really cool for a live stream related thing. Or at least a way to seat the final four battle. Do you know what I'm saying? But yeah, I think no matter what, it all comes down to the same thing. There should be effort and budget and financial support to make something else in drifting that is exciting outside of a 32 bracket that takes 4 hours to finish,
Yeah. Though I was going to say one of the problems with that, though, is that drift cars essentially do the exact same thing over and over and over again. And it's really fun for the drivers and it's visually stimulating for the viewers and stuff. But there's not much more else a drift car can do. Monster trucks can continually do new things. And even though they're racing, nobody cares. They just like the freestyle thing or, whatever else is going on, because the monster trucks can flip and do all this crazy aerobatic stuff. Dirt bike guys can do all that stuff. Skateboard guys can always invent new tricks. Drifters don't invent new tricks. Drifting is essentially the exact same thing, maybe turned up to 11 every once in a while. And the cars are exciting visually because it's something like, I own an FRS. That's a cooler version of an FRS and I wish I could build it, blah, 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 blah.
I agree. And to me, that is fundamentally why I don't drive FD anymore, because like they basically made it so you can't drive hard anymore. You get either 0 for doing a backy, or you get like, you don't get any additional points for driving more than 35 degrees of angle. Like, I've seen battles that are like, oh, one more time. And you're like, yeah, I agree. The line was the same. The transitions were the same. The chase, the lead was the same. But one dude had 20 degrees more angle the entire time, and you guys don't give a shit. Like, how does that work? Like, why the fuck did that guy win or lose? Like, you're literally like, drifting is about sliding around a track at angle, and you just one more time them. Like, how is there even a one more time? Let's get with that.
I don't know.
How in the world with complex drifting is there ever a way to actually have one more time? That's what somebody should focus on, because the level of judging is not high enough.
That's a good point.
There should
When I was over with Kieran
How?
Hines,
How do you have?
do you know Kieran, by the way? Kieran Hines.
Oh, the judge from that does
Yeah.
stuff.
I felt like they did. We were I judged that LZ event over there, and I got to use their system with the little controllers and all that stuff. And like, man, every run we were within 2 points of each other with 3 judges. Every once in a while, someone be a little bit out. But I was gonna say their system was much more consistent than like the American system, where dudes just sit up there and do their thing.
Yeah, and you don't get a lot of one more times that way, you know.
Yeah.
Because we get
Right.
one more times, like sometimes 2 or 3 with the same battle, and you're like, guys, like, that's
You're like, this is really expensive.
But the accountability, right? That's what I'm saying. Like, if you add,
How would a
something
judge be accountable?
Well, they need to just
You whip them?
add simplicity, add things that are simple that help the judges decide who a winner is. You know,
Mm-hmm.
like, it's not hard to go through and see where there's been lots of one more times or whatever and see it, because I call out a one more time because it's like, it's just easier, you know, like, but if we had some tools and some ways to do it, I think there could be, I don't think there should be one more times at all, really. I think just get rid of all of them ever.
Yeah.
They don't do it in the seating bracket, I don't think, and it works.
It doesn't make a better like show for the fans when they get to see a great battle one more time.
Certainly, but you're not sticking to the path of picking the best driver to win.
Fair enough.
You're giving them both another chance. Now, granted, you're definitely getting one more time if you both 0, you know, or you both do some astronomical thing that makes it unchaseable, you know, and whatever. I get it, but like most of the time, with one more timing, I'm like, nah, like, shouldn't be one more time.
All right, let's jump over to something I've always found really interesting, was the concept of tires. So tires and drifting, how do you improve tires and drifting? You've got wear, you've got make them stickier. I'm trying. You could do like the 235 rule that they do in Australia, which I actually hate, because I go up to bigger sizes like 285s even on a low power car, because I'm all about tire wear, not making the cars as competitive against each other as possible, if that makes sense. Because I'm more about the sustainability of drifting than making everybody's car the exact same. What else could you do with tires? Like, what do you think tires and drifting should do on the professional level? Should they put everybody on a 255 that last 10 laps? Should they go crazy with drift masters?
The size has nothing to do with any of it. Like, to me, you know, like there is in the extremes for the size, right? You have small tire, big tire classes, like E-Town, Gambler has that. It's kind of, one's unlimited and one is a 235 class, and they limit it to a specific types of tires.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is, like, all these tire companies, and maybe they have caught on recently, I don't know, but a lot of these like smaller tire companies that make batches of non-DOT tires that are so sticky that it literally takes all the engineering out of drifting, and you just need a car that has a shitload of power and steering angle and that won't break. Mm-hmm. And like, selfishly, for someone like me who's dedicated their life to finding out how to make a car perfect to drift and to set up and have speed and be able to win and do all these things, you get somebody who has a tire like that, non-DOT, super grippy, crazy, sticky tire, in like a 225, and it makes as much grip as like a 315 of another FD competition tire.
Mm-hmm.
Like it's like, so that's, I mean, the size doesn't really necessarily mean anything. For me, like this whole super grippy tire thing is ruining drifting. I feel like it's one of the fastest ways to kill drifting. Competitive drifting. Let me rephrase that. Actually, kind of all drifting. Like I'll go to a fun event to drive, and I'll have 265 Nittos on there that are just like a fun driving tire. But I'll have my chassis like really hooked up and set up and this that, and it'll just be some kid in like a crappy chassis that all four tires aren't even facing the right direction, and I'm just getting like pulled away from, and the kid's like diving all over the place, can't feel the zones, can't do anything, and he's like, I'm running 40 psi, like my car is so fast, it's crazy. And you're like, yeah, you put this tire on that's so grippy that A, you can't even drive it, and B, you've ruined all the fundamentals of us driving together, right? Mm-hmm. And it's just because, like my series is sponsored by them and I get a deal and this and that. And like, yeah, also they only last 2 laps. So like, what are we doing here?
Which tire are you calling out on that?
I'm just saying in general, there's multiple.
Uh-huh.
It's mostly like the non-DOT tires that some of these companies make. And like, obviously they just stamp whatever they want on the sidewall for marketing purposes, and that's it. Because you can do that even with a DOT tire. Like a ultra high performance tire can get stamped anything from 140 to 700 legally, so they just put whatever makes sense. So really, really sticky tires and all that, and these manufacturers just building more and more of that for competition stuff. Like, I'm big time against that because, and again, selfishly, like you should learn how to set your car up and do these things instead of just buying a Band-Aid and putting it on your car. Also, it like really makes it tough for people that might have a tire partner or whatever that makes great tires, but they're DOT and not semi-slicks and whatever the hell it is. And they'll stamp whatever number they want on the side of it. So some drift competition will tell you 200 tread wear. So it has 200, but it's really softer than a 60 tread wear DOT tire. And, now all of a sudden everybody just has to buy that tire or they're going to get fucking whooped, Another thing is the sustainability, like we were talking about. Like, it is also really cool to see tire companies be making specific drift tires. Like if I asked you 10 years ago if that was going to be a thing, you'd be like, no, there's enough tire companies out there that make good stuff that we just run whatever the best thing is currently, and we kind of evolve with that, and we try new things, and we do that. Now, like, you have like 6 or 8 companies out there that make drift-specific tires and are developing tires based upon drifting, which I think is really good.
Can I say something really quickly? Are those all drift-specific tires for competition use that are really sticky, or are there a bunch of drift-specific grassroots tires that work for a long life?
Yeah, there's both of that for sure. I think that like there's a lot of tire manufacturers out there that make the higher tread wear, like physical compound tread wear is stiffer, and they design it to last longer. When we were getting into drifting, our big thing was like, how do we find a tire that doesn't delaminate, right? Because like that was the biggest thing. And now like they build tires that don't delaminate, they last longer, they have good consistent grip, hot and cold. And there's a lot of development that drifting has done that even feeds back to street car tires and performance-based tires because they've learned a lot from it. So there's some really good to that as well, like we've been saying. But just to finish off the tire topic, I wish that for competition base, there was more of a better policing of that. I love the small tire classes. Unfortunately, people don't take it seriously, and they always look at it as a stepping stone instead of a way to enjoy drifting and have more fun with the same amount of marketing. The driving and the visibility of the 235 class, like from a spectator standpoint, is 100% better than the bigger tire, which further proves the theory of like having a tire that can't be maximized. And having a car that doesn't break and snap and shatter things because it's not under so much stress does make a better show and better driving. It's more enjoyable. So for me, I'm big on that. But I also talk to people that I'm very surprised when I talk to them. They're like, no, biggest tire, most power. That way other people can achieve what I achieve. And you're like, cool, that's like not the point, right? Right? You want to be the best driver. Why can't you be the best driver on a 235? That's stupid. It would be so easy to spin the tires. My car doesn't even fit that tire on it. This is stupid. Big tire. Like, I'm like, God, like you said, the alpha male thing earlier. It's like, it is that so stupid, dude. Like, you know,
Is that like a 235R compound or like a 235 Kenda?
no, not our compound at all. Like, I think the duration of a tire, like the how long the tire lasts is big. You know, I think obviously again, unlimited is unlimited. I think there always will need to be an unlimited class. You know, Formula D and Drift Masters, right? And all these big series are like the Group B rally of our age, you know? Like it's so cool because it's all so fucking crazy and you never know what's going to happen because it's like everybody's hanging on for dear life. But then at the end of the day, like people don't look as good driving super hooked up cars and shit when they drop a tire or get stuck behind someone or straighten in a transition or any of that stuff. Yeah, like, again, too, like the compound is more important than the construction of the tire and all that because, like, you can have a really grippy tire that lasts 10 laps if you wanted to. It's just a balance of getting that last bit of performance and having it last, you know, long enough.
Cool. All right,
I don't know.
let's do the next thing. Rules real quickly. Let's combine rules and cars. What would you change about rules and cars?
I don't really know the rule book of Drift Masters or any of those other European ones, so I'll stick to the FD related things. There's a couple of rules I think that are kind of silly in FD, but I understand all of them. But I think we should be able to run like whatever subframes we want, front and rear. Like I think there should be limitations to that. But it's kind of silly that like an S chassis still technically has to run a stock subframe in the front when it's like you can't even really get them anymore that are straight. And then everyone's turning them into BMWs anyway, because obviously the E36, E46 is the best drift chassis ever made by about 100 times.
But they don't win Drift Masters or all the series around the world. The S chassis dominate. Sorry, keep going.
To be fair with that, though, is the tire conversation we've had, right? But either way, I was being pompous, like funny with the E36 thing. But like, what does everybody do in a competitive S chassis? BMW rack, BMW knuckles, front steer conversion, all that stuff.
I have that on mine, by the way. It drives amazing.
Yeah, it's way better. Rear steer is garbage. I would never build a rear steer car ever. But anyways, but when I say rear steer, I mean rear steering rack, front wheel steering, obviously still. I lost my train of thought. What were we talking about? Before you sidetrack.
Rules of cars, and you were talking about subframes and stuff, and then I was going to modify this and give you a bit more to talk about in a second.
Yeah, so subframe thing is big for me. Everybody could swap engines faster. They can be more reliable. They could be a little bit more durable and stronger. I think that obviously there is a spec and rule that needs to happen with those subframes, but then you could fit bigger exhaust, like headers or downpipes. You could fit have easily more accessible things. You could have better oiling systems. You could have all sorts of different things. It would also cut down the cost and whatnot as long as it wasn't anything crazy. Same with the rear end. I think that you could have certain cars to have tubular subframes that are built within a spec. And then obviously the sport, the series, whatever, could just have a scan of the car and they scan it to make sure it's in the window. That's pretty easy to do nowadays for an investment in that. I think that the tire size should be capped at a higher, let me think of the best way to explain this, at a contact patch. So basically, like, it's not measured left to right. It's measured physically on the contact patch to weight. So
like a square.
Yeah, so basically you just like put something on the tire paint-wise, drop it on the ground, and you're in this box or you're not in this box. Cubic centimeters, very simple to do. And I think it should be capped at like a 285 size, even at a 3,200 pound car. So I think they should skew that whole tire size down quite a bit. So then the teams can actually engineer cars and have grip. And I think it wouldn't slow the drifting down. It would just make it more consistent and a little bit less abusive on all the car and driver aspect of things.
Okay. Do you have anything else to say before I complicate that answer slightly?
Just with the car rule, I think that's pretty much my end of it. The rest of the stuff is all pretty loose anyway.
All right, let me complicate that just a little bit. So we all have our own golden era of what a cool car is. And like, if you go back to IMSA 1990s racing with the silhouette where like you take a Mustang and it looks just like a Mustang, but it's a foot or two shorter because it's obviously just like a fiberglass or carbon fiber shell dropped on top of a tube frame chassis. It gets the proportions and gets the thing to look correct, but it looks 10 times cooler than an actual car. Those cars were 2,600 pounds. They're all tube chassis. Obviously, I think drifting has a huge advantage because we use cars that everyone recognizes, like an E36 is an E36 and, you know, like an S14 is an S14. They're not tube chassis. It's not some weird NASCAR thing where it's not actually a stock car. But you could take drifting to the next level and it gets pretty nutty with like 2,300 pound cars that look just like what they're supposed to, but they're tube frames. Everything is way easier to work on. And then there's obviously steps to get there along the way. Do you think drifting should go in that direction and create pure race cars that are easier to work on, probably cheaper to maintain, and have, I don't know how to properly explain that, but you would have S14s that look like JGTC cars, if that makes sense. Because like when you think of like, say an R34 or even the 350Z JGTC cars or Super GT or whatever they're called now, that's how far I am behind. People look at those, you know what I'm talking about, the Super GT 350Zs, they look otherworldly cool and it breaks your brain because it looks just like a 350Z, but the thing is a pancake, you know what I mean? It's a foot shorter on the roof line. You could have these crazy looking cool cars and they would probably not cost any more really to build than an FD car at this point. You would just need someone to start building the bodies and the tube chassis probably. Do you think we should take the sport in that direction?
I think there is a economy of scale with that, like you were saying, that makes it the same cost as building a really competitive FD car and having a team. I think there's a engineering cost involved with that gets higher. I think there is a monopoly of value in being able to build your own car and your own spares and your own things currently. That would be lost with that because you would just call Row Chassis or whoever builds it, you know, whatever it is, and just order your parts. And the bigger, the more expensive the sport gets, the more expensive the parts get, and they just keep finding ways to charge you more for the stuff as you grow. But yeah, I think that the serviceability and the more unified chassis would make this sport a lot better. I don't think going to tube frame and all that is really necessary. I think there's a hybrid in the middle of that works. But yeah, I wouldn't have a problem with that, if that makes sense, if that's where it went. I think, like I said, I think a hybrid of it is probably better. Like something like I was saying earlier with like having these subframes available and like having a scan set up and this and that for serviceability and other things.
Jumping back super fast, do you think IMSA would have been cooler if it used like 1980s Fox bodies that were just like a Formula D version where it's just, you know, stock subframes and you could use coilovers and you could put whatever motor in it and everything? Or do you think IMSA type cars are way cooler because they're those amazing poster worthy silhouettes that are so sleek and, you know what I mean, wide and everything else?
I don't know.
That are only available as a tube chassis. The same thing with like the Super GT cars.
Yeah, I think like one thing that makes our shit so cool is that we are doing it with street cars. And there
I
are
agree.
benefits to each of them instead of just being everything double A arm and solid axle or whatever the case they want to do is.
I completely agree with that. However, there is no cool looking Formula D 350Z that you would want to put on a poster that I can think of, whereas the Super GT 350Zs are epic looking.
Yeah. I mean, maybe. The problem is if you had a drift car that looked like that, every lap you'd be spending thousands and thousands of dollars on carbon canards and over fenders and all this little shit that you've engineered instead of it just being like, oh, everything's flexible, everything's this. I mean, I'm not really a fan of Z stuff, but like Forsberg's car on a poster would look sick. It's slammed, it's got cool stuff, the livery's cool, it's got carbon everything, and like, I don't know. If RTR bounced our cars before they took photos so that they were actually at ride height and not 20 feet off the ground like they always do, that would be also cool. You know, I think like there's enough things going on that make that like you would if you saw an RTR with no decals, no livery on it, and you lowered it another inch or two, you'd be like, damn, that shit looks crazy. That looks really crazy. You know, like
fair enough.
The cut roof, crazy thing, squished wider, also doesn't really align with drifting. Because
I agree with that, by the way. I agree with you on both sides.
Yeah, but I'm saying, like, if you had, okay, let's do this. I go buy a BMW Motorsports E90 crazy touring car, tube frame, whatever the hell it is, right? I think they actually went away from tube frame with a lot of that stuff, but then I put narrow rear wheels on it and 10 degrees of camber, and the wheels are pushed out in the front a foot wider than the rear ones, and we don't run a wing because you can't run a wing because it ruins drifting and we don't have enough horsepower to use it. And I take all the little aero canard bits off and all that, even if the roof chopped and all that shit doesn't even look cool anymore.
You might be right. You don't need to probably widen it though for no reason.
No, I have to unwiden the rear.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Unwiden.
Yeah. Right.
Okay.
Because like, what works in a drift car is having the front a foot wider than the rear, you know?
Mm-hmm.
So now all of a sudden it just looks weird, and you got to engineer this car around that, which I think the street car thing kind of still ties that together because they're like, oh, it's a unibody car that kind of looks weird because they got to do this stuff. But then if we build a whole race car based around fitting the wheels and doing all that stuff, it might start looking really fucking stupid like a dirt track car or something.
It might. I'm just thinking, you see race cars from the 90s like a Fox body, and it does not look 1/10 as cool as like an IMSA Fox body or IMSA SN95. And I'm just thinking about like Andrew Gray from Power Vehicles and I were talking, and he had this great line where he built that Lexus drift car because he wanted a car that looked like it belonged on a poster, because that's what he was into when he was a kid with race cars, is like a race car was something he wanted to see on a poster. And I'm not saying race cars need to be stance cars or anything, because I don't really care anything about stance cars. I think they're awful. That's going to get me a bunch of hate, but whatever. But we're talking about fixing like pro drifting. It might be kind of cool to have, you know, crazy looking IMSA looking cars. Anyways, that was just one topic. Okay.
Yeah, I think the first thing is to have all the cars just look better in general.
Yeah. The last thing is, I was going to touch on something real quickly and you can say something. Economics of racing is always going to be expensive. You are never going to fix that because companies get into it and they're going to spend as much money as you can. Rich people get into it. They spend as much money as you can. You think there's no fixing it? I think there's no fixing it. That's always been a problem. You can cap it, but it is what it is, especially in a sport with no engine like rules.
So there is a way to fix it. So that's actually kind of the opposite of what you're saying. I don't actually have the way to fix it, but just the conversation is different, right? So I have an interesting thought process with this, and it's pretty factual, right? Mm-hmm. So, and I've asked many people this question, and I have not gotten a solidified answer enough that I could actually do something. So if somebody's listening to this, and in the comments, we're going to pump your YouTube video right now. In the comments, answer my question here. Why, with how exciting drifting is and how 3 out of 4 people that sees drifting becomes, and also you can argue with me if I'm wrong with this. 3 out of 4 people that see drifting become a fan of drifting. It's accessible at a fairly low price. It goes all the way to a massive series championship in every country in America, basically.
Every country in America. Sorry,
in the world. Sorry, in the world. That's such an ignorant American thing to say. People travel from all over the world to compete and do this. There's, like I said, multiple championships. There are hundreds and hundreds of different ways to get entry for different types of people in the automotive industry. It's massive. It has grown at a 20% or more scale every year for 20 years, and only 10 people in America make a living off of it. How? How is that possible? How have we devalued ourselves as people, as competitors, as a sport as a whole? How have we devalued ourselves so much that only less than 10 people, because most of those 10 people make a living off of doing other things like stunt driving and committing to partners and doing content or whatever the case might be. How can no one actually make a living off of it? And it's, to me, the question has billions of levels to why, right? But like, I think everybody involved in competitive drifting after 5 or 10 years and does well, has maybe been on the podium, should be getting that comma moved one direction, you know, to make more money doing this. I'm not saying it's about the money. I'm just saying, like, we can't grow as a sport when everybody is taking tiny, small deals just to get by, to continue doing the same thing they're doing and struggle and burn out and leave, you know? So how is it possible to bring more funding into this sport so that it can grow? We can do really cool things. I have so many ideas. You have so many ideas that we could do for drifting to make it blow up, but we can't find anyone to invest money into it to do it. Meanwhile, pickleball became popular a couple years ago, and those people get paid 10 times what a drifter gets paid for to bring a fucking racket around and go do their sport. I'm not devaluing the sport. You can be really, really good at it, but the cost to do it is so low, and they're getting paid more. Like, you know, it's kind of a silly thing with pickleball, but it's kind of relatable because it's recent, it's new, it's growing, it's become popular with the mass of people, like, whatever, you know? Why?
Am I supposed to answer, or the people are supposed to answer?
Yeah, well, I mean, they can answer. You can answer.
I think we would both just say the same thing. Pickleball is probably more relatable to more people in a younger demographic.
But
it's skyrocketing.
But you have to be into sports and want to play them. You have to be maybe a tennis guy or whatever. You have to go to a pickleball court and play or wait or do whatever. Like, it's, the barrier of entry is lower, certainly, but I think the amount of people that do it is probably similar. Like, if you're into cars, you can love drifting. That's it. Like, if you like cars, you love drifting. And if you don't, for some reason, if you talk shit and say you don't, you still think it's cool. Like, you're just trying to be like, I'm a road racer. I'm a real racer. That's not real racing. You're like, sure, it's not. Did you like when you drifted? Yeah, sick. Okay, great. Like,
yeah.
How?
I don't know the answer. I think that probably the first part of the question, why more people don't make more money in drifting, you're saying the drivers themselves. Because I would think with all the Formula D teams, people that drive, like, build cars like Brian Wilkerson, or, you know, all the people that are at the top of their game building stuff, there's probably hundreds, if not thousands, of people that work within drifting, media related, you know, like Larry Chin and our buddy Tyler Capper, you know, people at the marketing departments of these companies. There's probably a lot of people that make money from drifting, and that is their career, but very few drivers. And I would say, off of what I just said, the reason why the drivers don't make money is there's always someone willing to do it for free and will pay to do it. There are drivers that will spend $1 million a year to drive of their own money because they want to go drive. There's privateers in NASCAR that just spend the money to just go drive NASCAR, probably without stickers on the cars. In Formula,
no, but they get money just to leave the grid.
I know, but they still spend 10 times more than that, probably. But I was going to say, Formula D, I'm sure there's drivers in there, or D1 or any series, that there's a sticker on the car for like a suspension company that gave them a set of $800 coilovers or $2,000 coilovers. And like they have 4 sponsors like that, and they spend $300,000 going to their first event because they have to build the car and do everything else. And the sponsors on the car do not equate out to the cost of the trailer tires.
Yep. Sorry,
like their stacker.
That's definitely part of it for sure.
So I was going to say, there's so many people that are willing to drive for free or spend crazy money. Because I've always just spent my own money to drive. I love driving. I just make it work. And then my portion of like work, how do I say that?
You're more focused on the driver aspect of it. I'm saying drifting in general. Like I even made examples of us like throwing events or some cool idea that we had to go do to grow drifting, to make it do something new and exciting.
Yeah.
And it's super hard to find any funding for it.
I see what you're saying.
Like someone, whatever it is, mountain biking, right? It was big, lots of people involved, but like downhill mountain biking, maybe there's more drifters than downhill mountain bikers. Don't know. Maybe it's the same. But like Red Bull or somebody will dump millions of dollars into doing an event for them and do that. Whereas like drifting will get less money and it costs more to put on. Right? Like,
that's a weird question though with like the Red Bull and all the other stuff, because Red Bull and some of these companies were big into drifting in the early years of the United States drifting, and they still are big into drifting internationally, but they don't spend it in the American market. So I don't know the answer to that one. Yeah, seems like they had a bad taste from someone or something they dealt with here.
Of course. This also is like part of my question, right? Like, are we just degenerate burnouts?
No, yes, you're right with that. Yeah, no, drifters are definitely degenerates doing burnouts, and I think that the companies don't necessarily want to spend that much money. I remember the story that BMW driver Michael Essa won Formula D with a BMW patch on his racing uniform.
Oh, I got the same cease and desist.
And
it happened to me too.
Oh, did you? Yeah, after winning a Formula D event, BMW's response to that is, get fucked.
Yeah, take our badge off of your car.
But then they'll put that in all their commercials and pay drifters to drive the cars in the commercials.
Right.
And they also support European drifters.
Yep. Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know.
But
I thought the economics one was going to be the least interesting, and that's the one you answered on the most.
Well, because that's my life, right? Like my whole life is to find a way to make this sustainable for myself and then immediately teach everybody else that. I know that kind of stabs me, right? But like, that's the only way to grow this shit. You know what I'm saying? Like, we have to find those ways.
So you're saying corporate sponsorships are the way to grow it?
Or just, I'm saying, having the value proposition of drifting match what it costs to do. That's a very simple thought, right? Like, and dude, no matter what, if you're a hobbyist, I'm sorry, no offense, you're doing it for fun. I'm not saying you should have support. Like, you probably, buy your tires, maybe get a local partner to help you out. Like, I don't know, whatever. But like at a level where you decide that this is what you want to do and you are good at it, you should have some sort of good at the whole package, right? The marketing, the this, the that, all the other. Like, when it's someone like me who has a large following, not the biggest, but large, champion driver, also probably one of maybe 5 people in the world that know how to set up a drift car and relate it to exactly what's happening. Like, all of that. But like, and I'm not going to play the pity party, but like, what I make is that's just like what a normal person makes, like that went to school for 4 years, and I work every day and bust my ass and live it. And I'm an icon for our sport, and I'm making the same as someone with a 4-year degree that just got out of college, probably,
You just succinctly said something and kind of changed my mind. I was thinking like, Chelsea, you are the person that makes money and you do have $1 million program and you do all these things. But by the end of the time you spend all the money on the program, you are just a normal dude with an F350 or whatever. Like, like, that sounds weird. You have normal things. Like, you're not rolling a stacker.
A guy who owns a local construction company.
Yeah.
I'm saying, like, I can survive and provide and do what I need to do after 20 years of investing my life into this. But like, I've had mechanics that work for me that I pay them more than I make in a year. People who work for me as a mechanic. Like that.
I was going to keep going.
I'm not saying that that's right or wrong. Obviously, my mechanic is super important to me because that's how I'm able to do a million things and achieve things while I'm traveling and going and doing. Like, he's my lifeline, you know, and he deserves to be paid what they deserve to get paid. But at the end of the year, sometimes I might be making less than them. And like, I'm killing myself. And again, not pity partying it whatsoever. This is what makes me feel that like the conversation needs to expand and people need to understand it, but also not at the sacrifice of having fun and enjoying drifting. This is just at that point where you're like, hey, I play golf. I'm pretty good at playing golf. I'm going to commit my life to being a golf player at a professional level. You're going to make money doing it if you're good. Like, that's just how it works. Golf's been around much longer than drifting. I'm not asking that to be a thing. But, you know, the only way you make money in professional drifting is using a series or a thing to make a platform that you can then separate and build your own brand or your own parts or your own everything else to make money, because the drifting itself or the partnerships or the whatever isn't sustainable at the current state.
I guess I've been around you so long, I never thought of it this way. I've always just thought of you as a normal person and all this stuff, but you are like the champion of one of the biggest things in the world for our sport. And you probably should, not because I know you're my friend or whatever, you should, as the like your position, I guess I should say, someone that has been a champion of the sport and everything else with the viewership and everything else, probably should make enough money where they could support like a family of 4.
Yeah, right. Dude, I don't have kids for multiple reasons, but that's fine.
That's interesting. That's such a crazy. I don't think of it this way. Our sport doesn't pay the top level people much.
That's what I'm getting at, right?
Okay.
So, like, you know, I think we're at a point now where people see drifting and they're like, I want to do that. I'd love to do that. And maybe they're super wealthy or very, like, have budget from some other thing or whatever, which is great. And they're like, I'm going to dedicate my life to drifting to become a professional race car driver. And like, at no point during that are they ever going to go green. They're always going to be losing money because they'll spend so much because they have it. And at no point is it more supportive than like if you're awesome. If you spent how much time I spent building a drift car, maintaining my program, doing all that as a bartender, you'd probably make 4 times what I make, which is crazy, you know? I'm not complaining. Like I said, I'm happy where I'm at. I made it work. Like, I'm doing it. But like,
right, but it's a problem with the sport itself.
Correct. Because we can't grow it because I have this awesome idea to do this crazy event that would be amazing. And like, everyone is like, holy shit, this would be sick. It would definitely sell all these live stream things and do all this crap. But I can't find a couple $100,000 to put the event on.
I see what you're talking about. Yeah.
You know? Or like, I was just drift track is like the same thing. It's like, oh, I want to build a drift track and like, we're going to do this stuff. And like, but like, you can't build just a drift track. You have to build a race track because otherwise people don't support you outside of these partners because you're just a drift track. It's like, why is it because we just drift? Why is it the minute we talk about drifting, it gets devalued, right? I don't know. Deep conversations.
Yeah. I'm still stuck on the part of the person that's at the top of the sport not making enough, but you flex online where everybody does think that you're making crazy money. Your new drift car is a Porsche. To everyone else, like, I don't know what year that could be a 2024 for all I know, a drift, like, you know, Porsches, because I'm not up on the 918 chassis or whatever it is. You know, you're driving 20 plus events a year, you're consuming all this stuff, you have a brand new F350, you've got a house, like, you know, we see you and you're doing all these things, like you're flexing, you've got all this cool stuff. It seems like you're doing super well.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not saying I'm not doing,
like, I'm not
poor. Those things. But the thing is you've got to think, how many things do you see me doing outside of drifting, which I have built a program to go do. Like, so if you look at, like you said earlier, we talked about this. If you bring in a $300,000 and you spend $250,000 to make that money, then you only make that. You only make 50 grand. You know, like, and not saying only, like 50 grand you can make work in today's society, but you know, but that's why I
drift a Porsche.
But the same thing, like the Porsche thing, everybody asks me, right? And they're like, how come you don't build a competition car to go drive, right? And I say, because it costs a lot to run it, not to build it. It's the same thing with the Porsche. Like, the Porsche, like, if I'm all in on costs of what it costs me to build, I'm probably right at about 55 grand. When there's like used E46 FD cars for sale for 60 or 65 grand that cost 200 grand to build, right? So like, we're not out of the realm. Like, I bought that car for like 35 grand. It's a salvage title 718, and like a new Mustang would have cost me that much to get, or like a new FRS chassis, you know what I'm saying? Like, or whatever that be, a GR86, whatever they are now, cost that much. Or like, it's kind of the thing where it's like, people are like, oh, like, you have a Porsche, and then the guy who's saying, man, must be nice, is it a King Ranch F350, and it costs more than the guy's Porsche. It's just like a connection thing that people don't get. But it's the same thing. It's like, oh, we got to do something wild and crazy and whatever. Okay, we're going to build a Barra swapped Fox body with a 700 horsepower and all this stuff. It would cost more than building this Porsche that I did. Like, so sure, but it's the value of viewership. Like, I'm doing more with less. And that has been my whole thing in my life since the beginning. You know, like, it has 100% stock engine, unopened, never even been out of the car. It has the transmission is 100% stock, it just has a clutch and flywheel. I just welded the diff. You know, the axles, the brakes, the chassis harness, the fuel tank, the coolant tank, all stock. Nothing's changed. You know, where like when you build a crazy car, the cost goes there, you know, regardless. And people are like, oh, it's just an S chassis, but fuck, damn, I have $80,000 into my S chassis over the last few years. And then running my Porsche has no costs because it makes a low power. It's like 400 horsepower, 400 torque. It is new, so the sustainability of it and all the parts and everything that's on it is new. The build quality is a lot better than these older cars that are all deteriorating. And like the fact that I go to the track, my Porsche costs me basically the cost of fuel and like long-term maintenance for the year. Whereas like if I build a competition car, like everybody's like, oh, build my new comp car. Like every time I unload the trailer and go drive it, it's $4 to $8 grand. I can't afford it. Like I can't. But then you're like, oh, a Porsche car, I can't afford it. Like, yeah, because once I built it, it was cheap. You know, the Fox body, built that because of sustainability and costs. Doesn't go through tires. It only has 400 horsepower. It lasts forever. It doesn't have problems because it's built very simple. It's super serviceable. It uses an OEM BMW clutch, transmission, and drive shaft. It uses an 8.8 that there's millions of laying around for $300. Like, it's just simple and cost effective.
Well, I like the Porsche, and I'm excited to drive with it on Drift Week. Okay.
Oh, yeah, you definitely need to drive it, though.
Oh, I would love to drive it. I can make a little YouTube video. That won't make me any money, but I get to use the car. By the way, I did this on Drift Week 3, I think. I drove like 15 of the cars and made YouTube videos. I didn't even make all the YouTube videos. But as soon as you're making YouTube videos on like a subject and you have a YouTube channel, people are like, here's my car, go drive it. And you're like, oh, this is fun.
No,
however,
like things on
90% of the cars are terrible.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Tell me about it. Trust me.
You're like, I don't know how you drive this thing. All right. I think the only thing left to talk about, which in the other video, you actually put we're making 3 videos. If you haven't seen them, they're on my channel, something, blah, blah, blah. I'm self-promoting. I'm so bad at that. So tracks, we were talking about the difference between professional tracks, D1 tracks, European drift tracks with like Drift Masters, and Formula D. We were talking about how Formula D tracks are fast, Drift Masters tracks are tiny, D1 tracks or whatever. I guess they're huge now, but they used to be tiny. I don't know. Do you want to tell me about how you would fix or change professional drifting with tracks? Do you think we need specifically made tracks? Just like, go ahead. So, one last thing before I do this. I dislike most oval tracks in America. You're really good at them, but I just don't want to drive them, and I don't really care to watch them that much. Oval tracks have always been a thing because the I'm just explaining because I don't think the average person understands this.
Yeah, the Coliseum factor.
Yeah, it's a Coliseum factor where all the bleachers are built in. And in America, that takes place at circle track. So at a circle track, if you get a big one, you have 10,000 parking spaces for cars. You've got 10,000 people to fit in bleachers. Everyone's really close. Snack bars, drinks, bathrooms, everything is laid out. You don't have to bring in bleachers and build out bleachers that cost $60,000, $70,000 to build out bleachers for a big crowd. You don't have to bring in a bazillion terrible porta potties and bring in food trucks and everything. These circle track places have it on lockdown for being built that way. If you build a big road course, sometimes they're built that way. And then when you go to Drift Masters, oftentimes they're building out the tracks and building all the infrastructure and putting up all the bleachers. And at the end of the year, they're using a stadium, and it's cheaper to do at their big event, pave a track temporarily in the middle of the stadium so that they can utilize the bleachers and all that stuff, blah, blah, blah. Okay, sorry. I just wanted to give people a contextual understanding of what it takes to build a track and why tracks are a certain way, which is typically they need to have spectators sit down in seats, and they need a surface for the cars to go around that the people can drive. And then as you get to bigger road courses, you can't see anything. The spectators at Circuit of America could be a mile away from the action, and it could be crazy amounts of walking to get everywhere. Oh my God, I'm sweating. No. Am I sweating? I don't know what's up. This is such an old shirt. That just might be shadows. Go ahead.
Anyways, yeah, I think Drift Masters is doing a really good job with most of their tracks at having something that is laid out to perform, if that makes sense. I kind of talk about this a little bit in the last video if you want to watch it, but or maybe the next one, however he puts these up. But one thing that they do well is they make a track that flows and doesn't have difficulty in zones to fill or anything like that. Like if somebody went into the parking lot and drove that track in the way that was empty with no walls and smooth, they would then put the walls into that and make it so that the car naturally wanted to drive that for most of the tracks. And I think that really helps the show. And I think also having more than 2 or 3 turns or some 4 turns like FD does makes it much easier for the judges to decide a winner, because each transition creates a difficult part of the track. Each turn, each thing that happens makes it so there's more of a risk for one person to make a bigger or larger mistake than the other one and select a winner. So I think that's part of it. I also am a huge proprietor of smaller tracks. I know that historically I have won almost all of the big track and oval track events in Formula D. I think it's because that's one place that our cars actually had an advantage versus other places. But like the oval tracks and things like you were talking about before don't really appetize me. Because I believe they're just like the hammer of tracks. Like I believe that it's just like requires so much car and so much tire and so much risk for something that's like just locked into really long time turns for a really long time, if that makes sense. So it's just more abusive on cars and requires more car. Whereas some of the technical tracks are more based on the driver aspect of it and the understanding of the dynamic of multiple turns. Something I think FD does really poorly is they make the tracks very, very difficult, and they build zones and do that to try to separate the good drivers from the bad. And then kind of what happens is there's decels and there's zones that are too tough to reach reliably and consistently. And the fact that there's only 2 or 3 turns makes you really focus on every single mistake the driver makes. And just overall, just a tougher, more difficult way to make drifting look great. I'd love to drive a whole series of kart tracks where like we have simple cars and make whatever horsepower, it doesn't matter, because in the end of the day, like it's a super technical track. It's all in a small area. And if you did bring bleachers in and you did do that, the people watching feel like they could see the entire track and have lots of things to watch, you know. And also another thing about longer, more turn tracks is during practice, you could be running the next group of people in the middle of that lap with a flagger somewhere, you know, like where the speed is not so great and so high, or the turns are so blind or whatever. The amount of laps you could get and the excitement from the people watching, there would just be like sensory overload all the time with people on track driving. So I think there's bonuses to all of it. I think the big tracks are cool to people that are not as technical because they like the speed and the numbers and how fast they're going and the simplicity of it. But when it comes down to drifting, I feel like drifting deserves the technicality of having more than 2 or 3 turns and having it be something that really is a flowing track that executes and shows what drivers are capable of instead of belittling them kind of the way some of the FD tracks do. Another example of that would be in Drift Masters, like you were saying. So they do have a couple tracks that are really big, and then you see lots of mistakes, people going off track, people straightening, people not being able to have lots of angle and huck the card and do that. It's not a thing about the drivers not being good. It's just the fact that when you get to those tracks that are faster, more difficult, require more power, more grit, it turns into a thing where everyone's so worried about getting pulled away from or not being able to chase that they keep hooking their car ups until they're uncomfortable. And I just don't think it's good for the show. So not to say Drift Masters is doing it better in any way, shape, or form, or the drivers are better or worse, or whatever the case is. I think it's just there's more emphasis on having it be nice for the driver, but then putting back the difficulty in the risk fact of having walls everywhere and all those types of things.
Okay.
Did I answer your question or no?
I think so. I was just kind of sponging that up and listening. I wasn't really thinking if that was answering my question. I was just enjoying your answer. I interrupt so much. I was just...
You're getting so much better at that. I'm awful at interrupting people. My wife and all my fans get so mad. They're like, dude, you don't understand. My brain is on rev limiter all the time. Like, if somebody stops talking, or if I don't interrupt them, you will not hear my thought.
I always thought it was interesting because, like, I'll listen to a podcast and try and get it, and I also get, like, not mad, but, like, I'm like, oh, I wanted to hear that person's response. But as me being a part of the conversation with you, I'm just, like, excited to, like, interject and, like, hey, that point's really cool. I want to talk about that point. But then someone listening is like, I was fucking listening to him. Don't interrupt.
Yeah, you're 100% right. That's the deal with like having it, like we're having a conversation together, right? And then we're going to share this with everybody to see. But it is truthfully like just a conversation between us. So everyone loves the candidness, but then also is like, don't interrupt each other. Like, but it's only us talking to each other.
Yeah. You're like, you're not a part of this. No, that was a really good... The last thing I would say about tracks is up until Drift Masters, D1 not included, American drifting has never built a track other than that little tiny like horseshoe at Road Atlanta. And I'm more focused on American drifting most of the time because I wasn't a part of these other regions.
They have
what?
Coliseum.
Oh, that's
track.
Yeah, you're right. That's new, but that's also not a drift track in my brain. They just like paved a couple little teeny sections on a drag strip.
I mean, it's literally the only Coliseum purpose-built drift track in America.
wasn't built for drifting. It was built for drag racing, and then they slightly modified it.
Of course, I'm just saying it was built.
No, I understand
for drifting.
No, you're right. I was just saying, like, Minami was kind of built specifically for drifting, and it was chaotic. It was exciting. People drove it differently throughout the years. They repaved it and remade it with different shapes over the years and decades, and it kind of grew. I was going to say, I wish that American drifting, the people that were involved in it at the high levels and extracted the cash from it, would build tracks, because they don't need to build a ton of tracks. I understand they're not in the business of building tracks and all these other things, and the economics don't work. But I wish
you wish that.
Yeah, I wish Formula D or whoever was a part of it or whatever was going on, because some of these teams spend enough money that they could just build a track in one season. RTR could literally build a track and then, whatever. I wish that something really creative and crazy got built and it could be utilized for all kinds of other stuff throughout the year, but they would build something like a modern Minami, because Minami was originally built for 90 horsepower cars, and then it just became chaotic and insane when like Daigo and everybody started bringing out cars, but it's still itty bitty, teeny tiny. It never had, like, it's just on the side of a mountain. It was never anything amazing. How do you say, like, construction wise? It was creative in the way it did its thing, and then creative in the way that the drivers did it and everything else. And it became this thing that was iconic and got a lot of us super excited over the years, especially the way it was like presented in video. I wish that someone would build something, like we always joke, like drifting should have loop-de-loops or backflips. Like drifting should have all these crazy things that change the sport and increase how crazy it is and everything else. And we're not seeing that. For example, you could have a bank surface that on the transition banks the other way, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
And the cars would be drifting like this, and on the transition, I don't know quite how it would work, they would pop up, if you know what I mean, like land and like hit the other transition. And you would have, like, you would take the driving skill level to the next level doing crazy shit like that. And you would see guys like yourself or Daigo pushing the cars so hard, flying through the air, doing all kinds of stuff. So I was going to say, you could keep doing wacky things like that. Like at Toge, where you come around that corner and it drops off. You could camber something, you know what I mean? And use elevation to do crazy stuff, but we don't necessarily utilize that. And then on top of that, when you have a venue like that, it would be easier to film at and make everything look amazing and make the drivers look more amazing, because the thing wouldn't just be a circle track that's not beautiful, or it wouldn't be, something that's, anyways, I'm just rambling. But I wish that they would build something super interesting and entertaining with all the money that goes through drifting, because we don't build any infrastructure. We build insane race cars, insane teams. They travel around. They destroy everything that they do. When I say destroy, they destroy the cars. They destroy the trucks and trailers through like depreciation, plane tickets, catering, tires. And we don't have drifting build anything necessarily that's infrastructure that stays around long term, that then everybody can utilize. All the drift tracks, for the most part, like the New Jersey oval track, was end of life. Irwindale is end of life. All the facilities are always end of life, about to be torn down because they're so old. They were built for something completely different, and drifting is utilizing them because it's the cheapest place to go. That makes sense?
Yes.
Okay.
I did so good not interrupting you.
I'm done.
I did so good not interrupting you. For everybody watching, I wanted to just dive in and just interrupt you so many times. Yes, you are accurate in all of that. And being at the top of the sport, as I am, like you were saying, I have been asked and consulted on to build many, many tracks. And all of
Keep talking.
End up being skid pads. All of these people have me design a track and draw it out and fly out there and look at the land and see what we can do. And I come up with these solutions and these great things. And then they call me 6 months later and they're like, hey, we're just going to do this skid pad thing so everybody can do burnouts and all that. And I'm not going to lie to you. you're laughing. It is the most upsetting thing that's happened to me in my life because like I am like, finally we get to have a place. Finally we get to do something where someone with a lot of money asked the right person and the place, and that person took the time because they believed in it. And then they build it in a skid pad, which devalues our sport. It makes the capability be nothing. It makes the visual cues, the attitude, the feeling, the emotion, the everything just lost. And it's like, oh, but we're going to have 100 people come drive all the time. I'm like, you're going to have 100 shitty E36s and Zs and all that come and drive, but you're not going to make anything that gives back to drifting. You're only going to hurt it. You're going to make more people look at drifting like it's this shitty sport that we just do with cones on a skid pad. And it makes me feel like, man, like I wasted my time. And I have to send them this email back every time. And I make them sign the email. Like I send them an Adobe file to sign saying that they cannot use my name or any association with what I have done for your place and build it, because I do not condone anything that you are going to do at this place anymore. And they're like, oh, but like, it's still a place to go drifting. I'm like, no, it's not. It's a parking lot that you are going to build for people to rip shitties and do sideshows at. Like, no, we're going to have events. And it's like, yeah, you're never going to have an event there that is worth anything to anyone. You're never going to get new people to come. You're never going to get drifters that are of a high caliber to come. Like, we'd rather go drive a circle track over a skid pad. So, again, with the devaluing thing we've talked about in the previous videos, it's like, man, like they're going to spend more money laying asphalt in a 500 by 700 square than they would have building a racetrack. Like, but they're like, oh, the skid pad more versatile. You're like, I quit. I literally quit. I don't know what to do. And then unfortunately, like, I have tried multiple times to find a way and funding to do this on my own, you know, like, so that way we can't get ruined by these people that don't get it, that just want to make a buck off of drifting, that don't want to give anything back, that don't want to grow, that don't want to give a place for Formula D to come and drive once a year. They don't want to give a place for people to meet and drive and do something with drifting that grows it and makes it more extreme. They don't want to have a place that has spots that when media comes, they sign a waiver that they can go these particular places that are built out to elevate them and set them up for these amazing shots and all this great stuff that costs almost nothing to do. You just have to build it around the infrastructure to do it. And like, again, drifting is so big. It's grown so much. It's not going anywhere. It's only getting bigger every single year, over and over and over and over again. But we keep getting smacked in the face by people, like, because we're degenerates or something.
I didn't want to interrupt you, but I was working on a track up here as well. Eagles Canyon was building, they're still going to build a drift track supposedly, but over a multi-year thing, they turned it into a skid pad and built a skid pad that's polished concrete. The land got taken over by the kart track, and then they accumulated some more land, and supposedly the drift track's going to come, but they pushed it back a couple years, and they built the skid pad. And I drove on it in a brand new GR86 and the new Supra, and I loved it. It was fun because it's polished, and they chalk it. So like
so it's like ice.
It is straight ice. It's really fun because it's so different, and like I drifted for hours, and like sometimes 20 minutes at a time, and the tires didn't care. Like it was common.
Yeah, they almost like blister before they like wear.
No, they didn't even do that. They didn't do anything.
That's cool.
But I was just laughing because it became a skid pad. But same thing.
Right. So like, oh man. Yeah. If you're watching this, I've said this in your videos before. If you're watching this and you really want to build a track and you want to do something great, I'm here. I'm ready.
By the way, I was working with someone up north that wanted to do a track, and I'm sure you knew about that one. That one, the dude had a heart attack or something. I was just supposed to go up there. I wasn't designing it. I was just supposed to take Drift Week up there or something to promote it. And then Chris Finch bought the land and bought a circle track. And then he's just like, it's too much hassle and I'm sick of drifters. So it's just sitting there and he still owns it. And we went out there a couple of times, but nothing's happened. But he wanted me to design a track and help him build it. And then this Eagles Canyon one, I think will still happen hopefully in the future. And I'm super excited for it because they put crazy amounts of money in this place and it's beautiful. But it's funny because it just became a skid pad. But like you and I, every year or two, somebody wants you to help consult and pay to build a track and all this other stuff. And then they always don't care about the consulting. They don't pay or they don't respect it or whatever. And then it falls apart.
Yep.
And we get a little hearts broken because you're like, I'll do this for free. I'll do everything. I just want to be a part of it. And then it just like falls apart.
It's so bad. And then what's the other thing too, not to talk smack or put any existing scenarios into anything to play. There are so many times where the opportunity is there and the person is listening and they just ask the wrong person and it turns into some copy track that has already existed, or they just go, I'm going to build a Mahon. There's like fucking 9 Mahons in America now. And you're like, well, again, why? Like, why? Like, it's 2 fucking turns. Like,
I was going to say that if you went to Mahon and you drove it, you would never want to build one.
Never want to build one here. I know. I'm not, and again, not talking smack because it's already built there and it's great. And when you go there because of who else is going to be there and the vibe, which is what drifting really is anyway. Like, I'm not, you know, like we talk about Ebisu, right? When Minami went away, I was like, man, do we really want to go back? Mm-hmm. You know, like Toge's sick, right? But
you just end up driving North Course all day.
But, well, because people don't want to run deep tandem on Toge for whatever reason. I know there's a little more risk, but it's not that much more, really. It's just like a thing. And then you end up on North Course all day. And North Course is good, but again, like, it's the same type of thing. It's like, when I'm there and I'm with the right people, I'm smiling, I'm having a blast. It's the time of your life. But I would never build North Course again, you know? I might use the second part of it with the, you know, chicane into the U-turn and back around, like in a track, part of another track. But like, yeah, like how many Mahons do we have in America now? I mean, there's like about 4 or 5 purpose built.
I was building a V8 car to send, like a V8 S14 to send to Japan, the T-Cox car, to drive it, Ebisu. And they shut down Minami during COVID, and I was just like, I'm over it.
I'm also going to get up.
Yeah, I was like, I don't need to build an entire car for this now. I put it up. No, it looked cool when it was dark.
Did it? I felt like I was a floating head.
No, it looks cooler, I think.
Okay.
It looks sick. Plus, we're almost done.
I turned these 2 like cheap little monitors I have on behind me so I could be mostly lit.
No, you look good that way. It looks like a black backdrop or whatever.
Okay.
No, I think we talked about everything. The only thing left really that's kind of a difficult thing to talk about is the media. And it's difficult to talk about because I did a video with Dave Egan, and he said on the Red Bull side of like Drift Masters, they have 100 employees to make that work. Obviously, some of those are catering and some of are production assistants and everything else, but you do require that once you get to a large enough scale. And you can't think, everybody always tells me like Formula D should have a live stream like Drift Masters. And you're like, yeah, but Drift Masters probably burns $6 million plus or something over the course of a season producing that like show. And it definitely does not make the money back, or at least I don't think it does. And then Drift Masters itself is owned by Worthhouse, and they also don't necessarily have to be profitable. And they also probably, by the time they own their own asphalt paving company and pave a Polish road, like, you know, a Polish track, which is things in Poland are cheaper than America. Like a lot of these things don't translate to America and you couldn't do them because they're just not economical.
So I think also one thing to think about with what you were just saying too is like, and maybe this isn't true and I'm just seeing it from the outside. I don't know hardly anything about Drift Masters. But, like, it seems like when you compare the two, if somebody like Worthhouse decided they didn't want to do it anymore, it would
it'd be dead. Yeah, exactly.
Right? Whereas, like,
same with Red
has built it without, like, big investors, without big things, like, just with partners and nurturing them and building it out of it. So, like, if a couple of their partners disappeared, Ryan Sage might be doing something to fund it in one way or another, but it would still probably be there. Like, and it's the likeliness of how contracts work and all that stuff. I'm sure they are at least betting it in so the big ones are overlapping enough that they would have time to figure it out, you know? I get the vibe that it's not as much like that over there, even from a driver's standpoint, where like it is a lower cost and entry barrier to continue to drive it. The cost of the cars and the consumables are similar, but I think like the travel is a bit closer and some other little things. And again, with the majority of the drivers over there have some sort of business or whatever that's funding it. Whereas like FDE is a little bit more like scrappy people figuring it out.
Everybody says there's a lot more money in Formula D than Drift Masters as well for the drivers. There's not as much partners and stuff, support and everything else. And the drivers just have to pay their way at Drift Masters.
Yeah, I mean, I think its grass is always greener on the other side. You know? Yeah. I look at it like this. Obviously, I'm an American going to drive Drift Masters over there. If I do decide to do that, like I'm looking at a $200,000 budget just to get by. And guys over there are like, no, it only costs this. And I'm like, just like in America, you say you only spend $50,000 to drive FD, but it really costs you $150, and you have.
But you have 3 sequentials in the trailer,
right? And you're like, oh, I guess you're right. Like, I remember having this conversation with an FD driver a couple of years ago that was growing and wanting to join another team and some other things. And like, I was like, dude, you spent $450,000 last year. He's like, no fucking way. It's impossible. Blah, blah. I'm like, do me a favor. Before you do this, find out what you're spending, because it might actually be worth it to do this other thing that you're talking about. And he's like, dude, I spent $500,000 million last year. I'm like, yeah, next time I spent $150,000. I'm like, dude, what? That's mega crazy, you know? Like,
yeah. I figured out how much I spend per year, and I don't like to tell myself it's true.
Yeah.
And you're like, oh, partners pay for stuff or this or that, but it's still money.
Yep. It is, because like $1 from your partner can go to you, or it can go to drifting. And that's what comes down to in the end. Like, that's why, like we were talking earlier in another video about it. It's like the financial support to drifting just needs help. Like it needs to be more congruent with the money it costs to do it. And the dollar per marketing effort needs to go farther, you know?
Yeah. You are a floating head now, by the way.
I know.
The cool lighting change. You no longer have like a catch light around you.
I'll go. Hold on. I'll do this. I think that's done this. Here we go.
Oh, there you go.
All right.
Got some stuff going on. Okay, I think that's everything. God, that was probably 2.5 hours to film all this.
I'm so hungry. I thought I was going to have dinner an hour ago.
Oh, sorry. I was going to say, in the grand scheme of YouTubing, if I just knocked out 3 videos, that is, and I didn't have to pay for tires, transport, anything else, that's the most cost-effective YouTubing I've ever done in my life.
Well, the problem is the people that are watching right now don't know that you sitting here and shooting these videos, and by the time you're done kind of editing and uploading, you'll probably have about 8 to 10 hours into it, and you'll make about $300 on all 3 videos.
I would be really happy if I made $300 on the videos, actually. I don't even think I'd look that much.
All 3 of
yeah. You know what? I don't do it for the money, though. I do it because, we've had so many cool experiences where, like, we go to Dubai and we, you know, like, or the Dorminati event. I do YouTube just for the future experiences I could have, and then capturing the things I'm doing. Or, like, we don't talk as much as we used to, but we used to talk, once every week or 2 or 3? Yeah, we talk for an hour or 2. And we always thought, like, it would be insane if you recorded all those conversations, because it's always like this. This is how we talk. This isn't like us podcasting. Like, it is a tiny bit, but this is how we normally
scheduled
talk.
Conversation, right? It's like if we wrote down the questions we wanted to ask each other. But I was only saying that because I'm like, oh, everyone's like, you're a YouTuber. It's got to make money. It's sick. You're a YouTuber now. I'm like, dude, please don't call me a YouTuber, because that's the worst failing business model I've ever had in my life. And people just don't get it. Like, they think your video got 50,000 views, so you made $5,000 or something crazy when you make $100 off of it. What's good about these videos is hopefully, Aaron and I were interesting enough that you watched the whole thing, and he plugged a couple ads in so he can at least pay for his time today.
You mean like just let YouTube roll the ads, or I plug an ad in for a company that I pitched and then, because I don't...
No, just let YouTube plug the ads, and if you have a good retention rate from us talking shit for however long we just were, then maybe it's worth something in the end.
I did have a BC Racing shirt on because that's all
right.
we own, because Cody sends them to me for free.
So if you were like just an influencer and that's all you ever did, and that video, this whole video, you were wearing a BC shirt and you plugged that into an algorithmic value, if you got 50,000 views on this, they would value that at like $30,000 to $50,000.
What?
They would. Yep.
Who?
Like a big, huge company, and the amount of airtime.
Where do I get this email address to send this to?
How long you were wearing that shirt and all that stuff. It's not how it works at drifting. We get hammered because it's too saturated, oversaturated, and all that.
That's
shit.
insane. No way.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
That can't be true.
Like a big company that uses a marketing software that tells you what the value is. If you do it,
do they actually pay that?
I mean, they have a value assessment to that.
Oh.
So some of the big companies do.
I will wear a shirt that says whatever gets me paid like that.
Yo, I'm saying. Imagine the content and the things we could do and all that stuff if drifting didn't get devalued down to the decimal point.
Yeah, but I kind of feel like there's just so much going on online now, you can't play that game.
I agree. I'm just saying, big companies do that when you're like a famous influencer and you're gonna have this logo or talk about this thing for however many minutes it's on screen. Every second gets $1 ad.
Crazy.
All this stuff. Yeah,
I need to do that. Okay,
your
you go
looks
eat
fake now. By the way, is that actually your apartment or your condo or house? Or
mine?
You're in?
Oh yeah, this is the second floor of my place. It's that I don't know if you can see is my child's kitchen set. That's why it looks so small.
I thought that was your real kitchen.
My kitchen's right behind me, and then this is the dining room table, and then the couch and TV and fireplace and all that stuff.
You can see our time difference in how dark it is here now.
I know, that's cool. Plus, I had lit myself with the
you got a ring light behind you?
No, just the window.
Nice. Perfect.
Yeah, there's no lighting or anything. You want to see the funniest thing on earth?
I like that floor. It looks bougie too, dude.
The floors?
Maybe I should be throwing events instead of being a professional drifter.
My Humvee is out there if you can see it. It's been parked for 2 years by a truck Land Cruiser like FJ55 and another FJ60.
You got to have it be close, otherwise, because it's so easy to steal those things.
Yeah, I have it's been sitting for 2 years. I have an M4 on WiseFab in the garage, which is funny.
That's great.
I'm not going to walk you down there. We don't ever use it for anything. It got built, and then we realized we don't like modern cars.
Yeah, because when something goes wrong with it, it takes weeks to figure out what's wrong with it.
Yeah, we had to set the wastegates on those things and stuff. Like, all the little things, you're just like looking up like, oh, what the hell? And like there's little tiny actuator rods on the wastegates, if you know what I'm talking about.
Yeah.
And all this crazy stuff on those cars, you like have to learn all new stuff and all the BMW crap. Anyways, let's end this video. Goodbye. Go eat.
See you later.
Thank you for taking the time. Boom.
Later.
Okay.